Hello, everyone. I am Jessica Koch with Jessica Koch Consulting, and I am the host of Profound Professionals. Profound Professionals was founded in 2018. We started doing interviews and featuring amazing individuals, CEOs, authors, speakers, really leaders in their industry all across the country and moving out all across the world. So today, I have the honor of interviewing Heather Rosen, president of FranNet for Virginia and DC, and she is this franchise specialist, but she is profound for a number of great reasons that are so very timely with what is happening in our world right now. The world has been through a lot of challenges, and before we get started on this great interview and before I let Heather talk a little bit more about herself, I just want to say that our hearts and prayers go out throughout our country, well, throughout the world, for everything that's been happening from a health standpoint, but additionally, what has been happening in the cities and for the families in our country. We are just going to say prayer for peace and for understanding and for patience and for us to become, to join back together, because it's the only way we're going to win in any situation. So if we could just bring ourselves back together, that would be what we would send out for positive energy and love and healing for families and people right now. That aside, this interview, I think, is special and important because February 2020, we were about 3% unemployment, and we're approaching 14, and I hear predictions of much higher. I've heard talk of in the 20s. And Heather has some amazing ways that for a very long time, not just at this moment, has been making an impact for families and lives in that realm. But first, let's say good morning and hear just a little bit more about you, where you're from, a little bit about your story, and how you got to be president of FranNet, and we'll learn about what that company does for others also. Hi, Heather. How are you?
Hi. Thank you for having me on your program.
No, my pleasure. A little longer introduction and me chatting than normal, but I felt like it was important to do.
Oh, yeah.
But I would love to hear, you know, we just met very recently, so please, where are you from? A little bit about maybe your family or your journey to get here. I can't wait to hear. Sure. I love it when it's a surprise for me too, not just for you guys.
I know, we've never discussed this. So I'm originally from the suburbs of Philadelphia. I lived there most of my life. Actually, it's interesting. You get to a point where you realize that you're from there, but you've actually lived most of your life someplace else. So in 2001, I moved to the DC area. Back in Philadelphia, I was a lawyer, business lawyer.
Wow.
I used to do transactions, litigation, basically a problem solver for businesses, using research and teaching in order to help businesses solve problems and also take advantage of opportunities. Back then, you know, one of the things that, two things actually got me interested in law. One was helping companies find new markets overseas. And then I started getting to really know the Philadelphia community and developed a place in my heart for musicians. And so part of my practice, it ended up being about a third of my practice, was helping musicians who were extremely talented and hadn't been paid. And interestingly, most of the people who hadn't been paid were Black. And I just thought it was an incredible, you know, it wasn't just, it wasn't fair. All these people who had given us such, you know, wonderful things that became the soundtrack of our lives, they were really living in poverty, and it became my personal mission to help them get what they deserved. And I'm also a fan of music, and so that really drove me personally back then. Mm-hmm. But I moved in 2001 to the DC area to work in big law firms, because at that point I had developed an intellectual property practice. Mm-hmm. And there were some really big firms in DC that had been acquiring. It was in the middle of law firm acquisition time,
Frenzy.
and and firms were just acquiring these small firms, and suddenly you had a firm that was only known for, you know, regulatory work, and suddenly they had a big intellectual property practice, and that's what was happening. And so I was recruited, moved. I had just gotten married, moved to DC, and started working for one of the biggest firms in DC, that had, and it was an international firm that had acquired another law firm and helped them, you know, integrate a practice, but also put that firm on the map for intellectual property work. Then about 7 years later, another big firm in DC recruited me and wanted me to do that for all of their practice groups. And I actually did that up through the recession in 2008. I was part of a team that was responsible for laying people off. And, you know, as miserable as that was, it's almost better to be laid off sometimes than to be left, because when you're left, you usually have less people if you're a team leader, as I was, and less money, and you're being looked at very, you know, carefully, because you're sort of told, well, you're just lucky to have a job. And, you know, not ironically, I mean, a lot of that is going on right now. History does tend to repeat itself. And at the time, I had a young daughter, and she's older now. But you know, as a mother, even though we were fortunate to be able to pay for daycare, you know, was really stretched. And as the expectations of the firm went up and the resources went down, I found myself, you know, extremely stressed out, feeling like I couldn't really be everything I wanted to be for the firm. Also, definitely couldn't be everything that I needed to be for this young person that I was responsible for. And I got very sick, and I was looking around me, and everybody in my position or above was sick, because that kind of stress takes a toll on your body. And so I started to think about the fact that, you know, kind of things that had worked for me had been great before, because of changes due to the recession, weren't working anymore. And so fortunately, I knew people. I had my father was also a lawyer and had also gone into business. And so since he knew about various business models, we had a conversation over vacation. We were in the ocean, and I said, you know, I'm thinking that what I'm doing is different. Things have changed, and it's not sustainable anymore. My life has changed too, but also the entire industry has changed, and I'm thinking about doing something different. What do you think? And I kind of, you know, sort of sprung on him, and he said, okay, well, let me get back to you. And that sort of propelled me into this next phase of my career, where I'm doing what I'm doing now.
And FranNet, tell us about how that works and what that is. And I mean, obviously, I right away think of franchises, and your title is a franchise specialist. And the first thing, of course, that comes to mind are all of the restaurant chains and things like that. And actually, I'm hard pressed to think of some others. I know that there's been some dry cleaner kind of franchises, maybe, and I think there's some specialty like a cleaning service kind of ones that do things. But I think it's a bigger picture than we realize than that. So talk to us about what your company provides.
Yeah. So I run a consulting service, and first of all, you should know that FranNet itself is a franchise. So FranNet is, I think, a 37-year-old company at this point. I want to say about 16 years ago, we formally franchised ourselves. So we're franchise advisors that are also a franchise. Let that sink in.
That's interesting.
But actually, that's really normal, because a franchise is a legal entity. When you behave a certain way as a company, the law says you are a franchise. And then if you don't go and file all of the regulatory paperwork with the government, you're then an illegal franchise. And you don't want to be an illegal franchise. So our own lawyers told us that you should become a franchise because you're operating like one. I mean, basically what happens is as the corporate office becomes more controlling over the activities of the people who are running the business, as they dictate more and more about what they have to do, rules and regulations, the law says, well, you're a franchise now. And then they're collecting a royalty or some sort of payment from them. Some of the companies that do this aren't franchises, but they are. They just don't know it. And that's problematic. So we took our lawyer's advice and became a franchise that many years ago. But the thing about this, so here's another example that, people don't think, or maybe the first example of a franchise that people wouldn't think is a franchise. It's a consulting firm. And there are thousands of franchises out there. This is an example of one that doesn't have retail space, where, sometimes I work from home now all the time. But, before this, I do still have a small office. I haven't been there since the middle of March. But a lot of times I'm working from home or, I'm out speaking, and there's no retail space. And so for me, I was the main breadwinner in my family. And so I had this idea that I was going to go out and, be a business owner. I was going to run my own business and, decide who I wanted to hire, when I wanted to hire them. If I wanted to put more money into my marketing budget, I made that decision so that I would succeed. I wasn't having to ask for resources that I needed. I would decide that I would have the resources and that I could go and be successful. But being the primary breadwinner in your family means that you've got to make it work pretty quickly. I didn't have the luxury of waiting 10 years, which is really the average amount of time that successful business owners will tell you. If you ask them, how long did it take you to become successful? They'll tell you at least 10 years. I didn't have 10 years. We had a conversation, my husband and I had 18 months. And so I had to do something that was pre-built. I had to go with something where I could prove that I was going to make a certain amount of money in a certain amount of time. I mean, you can't prove that to the day, but you can look at the range and you can say, okay, if I'm all right with the outside of that range, then I can go do this. Otherwise, I can't. I couldn't have afforded to make this move.
And so I get that FranNet is a franchise and that it helps people with franchises, but tell us a little bit more of how you kind of work through someone's considering, or they're in transition, they're about to retire, they want their second of their next thing, or they have some investment money or whatever the situation is. Where do they start in the world of franchises?
Well, I say legally we're brokers, but the process isn't like any other kind of brokerage process out there. We're not like stockbrokers. We're not like real estate brokers. We're really like career counselors for people who want a business instead of a job, really. So we use assessment tools, which are developed by FranNet, the proprietary tools. But I'm a consultant, and a lot of what I do is similar to what career counselors do. Is we look at the results of the assessment, but then we talk for about 4 hours. I mean, I break that up, but I know what questions to ask. I know, so FranNet actually is my research arm. They feed me information, updated information about the industry, so I know what's doing well. And then I, since I operate just in, Virginia, DC. Some of my clients live in Maryland too. It's the DC metro area. But I have to understand what's out there so that I know what questions to ask, and that's doing well, so that I know what questions to ask my clients. And so it ends up being a process of looking at the assessments, understanding how to use them, and then knowing what additional questions to ask people, so that I can understand somebody's, we start with, I want a business, but then first of all, I need to figure out if they have the resources and the motivation. The motivation for someone going into business is the rocket fuel. It's going to get them over the hump of the first couple of years in a business where they're building. But then I have to understand that they have the time and the money to do it. And then I have to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what would make this individual happy and successful. And so that's that process of going through the assessments and additional questions. And then they follow my research process so that they are able to look at a bunch of different options, but everything is chosen strategically for them to look at so that they
So
can
instead of thousands of options, they're narrowed down to a reasonable number based on all of the research that goes into it at first. Because
exactly. I mean, you could never research thousands of businesses, so you have to know how to eliminate the ones that don't fit so that you can just evaluate the ones that do fit or might fit side by side. And then you'll feel like you've really done your diligence, looked at all of your possibilities, even though you really haven't. But you looked at all the possibilities that made sense in the first place and said, now this is the best one. I can comfortably go forward, confidently go forward and say, I found the best one.
Well, it's a huge decision. I mean, larger than, I mean, they say one of the biggest purchases you'll ever make is your house, right? Well, potentially it can be as big or not big. In a lot of cases, way much bigger. Way bigger is what I was gonna say. Oh, so big of a decision when you make an investment like that, right? So that is huge. One of the things that I love is how well your research and the tools that you're using and just your mindset and even your attorney, your background as an attorney tie into the next thing. So one of the things I love to feature people who are top in their industry. This is a really unique industry even, and the service you provide is so valuable and interesting, right? It's not something you hear about every day, but it ties so well into what you do that is your passion kind of outside of your direct business and direct profit for your own family. And you want to share a little bit about what makes your heart sing outside of your company?
Yeah, I mean, my goal in franchising is to help people in transition, but a franchise isn't always the best thing for somebody. Some people shouldn't go into business, and some people should go into business, but this isn't the time in their life that they should be doing that. It doesn't, they have to have a lot of things have to fall into place, including they have to have somewhat of a financial runway. I mean, even if it only takes 6 months for a particular franchise to be profitable, it's not going to be, they're not going to replace a salary in 6 months. And some people right now have big financial obligations, so they have no runway. Mm-hmm. So I run a local chapter of a group called BANG. It's the Business Executives Networking Group for people who are in transition. And most of the people who attend the meeting are looking for a job. Sometimes it's a business, but usually it's a job. And I bring together people who are in the same boat as them, who are out networking, trying to find jobs. And I bring in speakers on different topics that'll help them look for job opportunities and meet people that they would need to network with in order to get their next job. And then the group actually everybody helps each other. I know this person at that company, or what about, oh, you're really good at this. Have you thought about a career in that? This was actually a group that was started during the last recession by somebody who was a job seeker, started in the Philadelphia area, and I brought it to the DC area.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm excited about it. And I feel like based on those stats that are staggering to my mind, it's why I keep sharing them, not because I'm trying to, highlight the doom and gloom of the moment, but I'm just trying to say this is a need, and anybody out there who can help and assist in this category for the people and the families in our country need to step up and volunteer their services in some way. I plan on reaching out to a couple of organizations I know and donating gently used suits and just getting people the things that they need. I know resume writers are, some of them are reducing their fees, and I've reduced my fees for my LinkedIn training. And we're all, if we can all pitch in, we can help the families of our country get through this wave of unemployment that is, it's a little scary for those people who want to provide for their families. And what a beautiful place. I had the honor of attending one meeting with you, and I have to tell you, I was so incredibly impressed and touched because it was like a micro mastermind for these people. And most of them were actually employed or had something going on, but were looking with the forethought and with, you know, with vigor, what was their next act? What was their next thing going to be? And the way that everyone did, just as you said, jumped in. And so the one person had a chance, an opportunity to talk, and everyone went around and made amazing suggestions or offered to make connections and introductions and do these different things for each other. And really, we had just met, but I was excited to be involved and to do it too. And I actually made several introductions and connections for the people. And the one time that I was there and felt quite comfortable doing so. I mean, I ended up with copies of the resume and seeing their LinkedIn and seeing the recommendations on their LinkedIn. And so all of those things made it very comfortable for me to be able to make those introductions to other people. It's really outstanding, and it's primarily, so we'll make sure that the website is in the comments or the description, and the link for the upcoming meeting this Thursday. It is, the only thing I wasn't ready for, it is definitely a little longer of a meeting, but it needs to be, because then everyone really gets a turn to everyone to throw in that like brainstorming moment for them and that mastermind capacity. I just love it. And they do have one chapter in California, but that's their only the lone wolf on the West Coast over there. Everything else primarily seems to run up and down the East Coast here. And I'm predicting that, and I'm hoping that this video and others watching will to reach out, get involved for chapters to be in the different major cities of our country where there is a need. So again, even virtually, this kind of collaboration and support can happen so that everyone feels like, I think the most important thing is they're not alone, and
Right.
there's hope, and that there's a connection waiting out there for them. You've been involved in this for how many years now?
Bang, I believe about 5 years is when I stepped up to open the chapter in Northern Virginia.
And
Yeah.
you collaborate with someone on that?
I collaborate with somebody. We actually, I ran the chapter when we were live doing these. I ran the chapter in Oakton by myself, and there was somebody who was running the chapter in Alexandria, and we merged. I mean, we just decided, we're all volunteers, and so we decided that, you know, we would be able to capitalize on efficiencies if we work together.
Yeah.
I use my assistant for my FranNet business, and he doesn't have an assistant because he's just an individual. And so I'm able to help reach people that, you know, would have been interested in that chat. But everybody's online now, so it really.
We were talking about earlier. It's fantastic, right?
Well, it's fantastic. You know, it's interesting because we got together in December. We saw each other at a holiday party, and we had this discussion about merging the chapters. I mean, of course, this is pre-COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, yeah, I mean, let's use my assistant. She'll publicize the meetings for you too. I'll invite my people to your meetings and vice versa. And then we'll be able to offer the service to people in 2 different locations at 2 different times of day. So we actually were planning to do this anyway. And then COVID comes along, and suddenly, well, we're doing everything online. So of course it makes sense to just do it together. I mean, I know that I've definitely alleviated some of the burden, a lot of the burden on him, but it's made the chapter better. I mean, I think our meetings since COVID have been as good, if not better, than they were before COVID.
Mm.
And now, of course, like you said, this service is needed more than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. And I'm really grateful, again, that you're giving your time for it. So we really appreciate that. Again, we'll make sure that the link for all the chapters is available in the description of this YouTube video, as well as in the LinkedIn article that will be going out very shortly. We're also going to have a link so that you can register for the Thursday events. But I believe on the Bang website, there's a way to reach out to Heather to get on the email list so that you can find out about future events. Is that correct, Heather?
Yeah, I'll provide a link so that people can sign up for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's all free. The Bang is free. Also, FranNet consulting services are free because we're viewed like recruiters for franchises. So the franchises actually pay our fee. So, you know, we
Oh,
just,
that's good to
oh,
know. I didn't know that. I should have
yeah,
asked that question. I mean, how amazing is that? You give tons of time to help them go through that process, and with your knowledge and your background as an attorney, I mean, and that's pretty much free consulting with a franchise person who has the consultant that has the attorney brain. I mean, can you ask for a better deal than this? I don't think so. So I think that's fantastic, and I absolutely hope anyone who's giving that some thought nowadays, and there are investors out there, and there are people who have resources who are thinking about this. You know, one of the things I try to make sure I tell and say on every broadcast, especially lately, is to say, look, there is still money out there in the world. There are definitely still jobs. They might just be different jobs than you've had before. People are still spending money. There's still the money in the world did not evaporate. It is still here, and it just may look a little differently than it did before.
yep.
So have hope and hang in there and know. I mean, especially in the circle of investors that I have. That I have the honor of having access to and knowing and speaking to on a regular basis, this is the time when most of them will decide to make investments because they're a good value, right? They're getting a good deal when things get shook up a little bit. In some cases, that is a time to buy. So
They
have
say
hope.
out of chaos comes opportunity.
Yes.
I mean,
Love that.
we're in a world right now where the demands are different, but there are still demands.
Yes.
And the people who are able to identify the current demands the quickest are the people who are going to make and who are already making a lot of money. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, let's talk about Zoom. Zoom, you know, kind of crashed in the first couple of weeks after
Yeah.
COVID because of so many people using it. They had to upgrade everything in order to meet their demand, and they're still having, you know, some issues, but they continue to upgrade. But they, you know, they're doing, you know, financially, it's kind of like one of the hottest companies right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they're public or not, but you know, there are companies that are doing extremely well, and obviously that's where you want to put your money.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to thank everyone for watching, especially everyone who's taking the time to watch the replay. Please, if you have a family member or someone you know, share, like, and comment on this video. Get them this information about this organization, no matter where they live in the country, because they may decide to reach out directly to the organizers at the Bang .org chapter website and see about starting a chapter in the city near them. Even if it's a virtual chapter in a city near them, this could bring benefit to their community and to the people who are struggling right now with unemployment. So before we say goodbye, I always like to ask if there's just one last thing you could share with everyone who is kind enough to take the time to watch and to like, share, and comment. So if you could share with us one last thing before we say goodbye, something that's inspired you, a quote, a book that you just feel like has really helped you, or something that you do in your process or in your daily life that you felt has really helped either your life overall or your business truly succeed. Is there something you can share with us?
Yeah, this isn't a book, and this isn't a famous quote on the internet. But when I was a young lawyer, in Philadelphia, I had a colleague who worked in the office next to me. And, at the time, both of us were going through, trying to kind of find our person. We were, in relationships and trying to figure out, kind of who was the best mate for us. And something that he said to me has stuck with me, and I've used it in business, which is when things aren't going well for you, don't just switch to something else, upgrade. And I really use this. I mean, in life, things change, and a lot of times you're on a path that really wasn't working out very well in the first place. And, I think, one of the characteristics of successful businesses is that they're able to pivot and adapt when things aren't going well. And, when you're realizing that things aren't going well in your business, but also in your life, don't be afraid of change. Look at it as not something to fear, but your opportunity to upgrade to something that is actually going to bring you a lot of joy. I mean, when I went through this transition, and I thought, those days were pretty dark during the last recession. And I just thought, oh, woe is me, for about a week. And then I just said, what's next? There's something that's gonna, happen to me, that's supposed to happen for me next. I just have to figure out what that is. And I couldn't have imagined back then that I would have been in this situation, which has brought me an incredible amount of joy and freedom and flexibility and more money than I was making in that life. But I wouldn't have found it if it weren't for sort of the change in the industry and the recession at the time. I wouldn't be here today. So look for the opportunity to upgrade.
I love that. And so hopefully I got it right. I typed in, when things aren't going well for you in life, don't just switch to something else, upgrade. That's fantastic, actually. We should totally give your friend quote credit for that, because people are going to be quoting that. So what was his name? Can we give him credit?
His name was Brad Slen.
Brad, and how do we spell it?
BRAD, last name was SLENN.
SLENN. Quote.
I haven't talked to him in years.
Well, you can tell him he got a YouTube live stream shout out. And now people are going to be walking around with t-shirts that say, don't just switch to something else, upgrade. That is great, because think about this. I think about, I've done some volunteer work, and I've had some of my own experience, unfortunately, in relationship in the past, where, you're with the wrong person who's really not treating you well. And unfortunately for some women, they get stuck in this pattern of, and some men too, I'm sure, but individuals get stuck in this pattern of being with someone who isn't healthy for them or good to them as they should be. And I was so blessed in my second act. So I was married for 7 years the first time, and I'm remarried now. I'm with an amazing man. We just celebrated 20 years married, 21 together, and the most blissful experiences of my existence truly are every morning that I wake up with him. So yeah, pretty amazing. And so I'm so glad that I was able to not just do something different, but actually upgrade, and that is totally what happened for me. And it's also what happened with my career as well. Like, this is one of my new favorite sayings. I'm so glad you shared that.
Maybe we should start a trend, #upgrade.
That's right. I love it. I love it. Absolutely. Heather, thank you so much for what you do. And thank you so much for sharing some of your story with me. I was so honored to get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone again for watching and for being kind enough to share this with someone who may need these resources, who may need that extra support, need that free volunteer, really powerful, because I've experienced it. I can say this mastermind experience of knowing you're not alone. There is something out there for you, and there's someone potentially in one of these groups that know just the right person to introduce you to and connect you with. We wish you all well. We continue to pray for the world to heal in all of the ways, emotionally and physically with health. So until the next Profound Professionals, I'm going to say goodbye, everybody. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye.